28 years ago, in the cold rain of a Kentucky night, a young man vanished from the face of the earth. No farewell, no clues, just the fading sound of an engine in the fog and a half-finished call. "I'm driving through the field. Something's weird." From that night, Leonard Little was never seen again. His car disappeared as if swallowed by the water. His family, desperate, the police stumped, and the whole town of Harrodsburg, haunted by a question no one could answer. Where did he go? Leonard's best friend, Derrick Caldwell, became a familiar face in every search effort, the dedicated mechanic, helping to piece together every detail of the disappearance. But no one suspected that the very man helping was hiding a secret cold enough to make all of Herrington Lake tremble. For years that lake lay still like a silent witness, holding tight to what people wanted to forget, until a team of cold case investigators, the Cold Case Unit, returned to where it all began, bringing modern sonar technology and the determination of a young female detective. Each sonar ping echoed from the lake bottom, reflecting something bigger than a car, a collision, a betrayal, a crime disguised to perfection. And then, every fleck of paint, every strand of DNA, every old statement, began to tell the real story, the story Kentucky would never forget. Before diving deep into this case that shook the whole state, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love cold cases being uncovered from the shadows, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Rain fell relentlessly on the road winding around Herrington Lake, heavy drops pounding the windshield, leaving streaks of water that reflected the dim lights of a few scattered houses along the shore. Thick fog swallowed the entire space, leaving only the steady hum of the engine and the headlights cutting through the milky white haze. Leonard Little sat behind the wheel of his black Lexus, shoulders hunched slightly against the cold, eyes tense as they stared ahead. He had just left Derrick Caldwell's house, his best friend and fellow auto mechanic, after an evening of conversation that seemed harmless but ended in a strange atmosphere. Something between them had broken, though neither said it out loud. The car slid lightly through the curve, tires grinding on the rain-mudded surface. Lenny turned on the radio, hearing only static crackle. He pulled out his phone, dialed the familiar number. "I'm driving through the field. Something's weird." His voice choked amid the rain and wind, then the signal flickered. The line went dead, leaving only the echo of rain in the earpiece. At the other end, his mother stood frozen in the dark living room, gripping the phone tightly, calling back several times, but hearing only the cold, busy tone. Outside the window, wind whistled through the trees, streetlights casting shimmering shadows on puddles. Time dragged heavily until dawn broke, the faint morning light filtering through old curtains, when Leonard didn't come to pick up his child as usual, and the family started calling everywhere. No one answered. Mrs. Little paced the room, phone at the ready on the table. She called his workplace. The manager said he had no morning shift. When she dialed Derrick's house, she heard a hesitant voice on the line. "I haven't seen him either. He left last night, probably went home, right?" A long silence followed, broken only by the heavy rain drumming on the tin roof like a pounding heartbeat. Her hands trembled, clutching the receiver. Leonard had never stayed out overnight without letting them know. Never. She set the phone down, then picked it up again immediately, dialing the police station. Her voice caught, trying to stay calm but failing. "My son hasn't come home. He's missing." The missing person report was received early that morning, while the rain still hadn't let up. Patrol cars from the Mercer County Sheriff's Office flashed red lights sweeping through the thick fog around Herrington Lake. The blinking lights reflected on the murky water surface, mingling with the wind rustling through dense trees, making the scene both desolate and suffocating. The first two officers on site took down the information. Male, 30 years old, left his best friend's house the night before, driving a black Lexus, didn't return. They drove along the main route, the narrow road hugging the lake shore, empty of people and slick from the night's rain. At a small turnoff leading down to the low ground, a faint tire track was etched in the mud, stretching right to the water's edge, and then vanishing. One officer crouched down, measuring with a tape, It matched the width of mid-sized tires, possibly a Lexus. But the rainwater had washed away any other traces. If the car went in, he said, we'll never see it from the shore. The water rescue team was called in, 3 divers preparing to go down. The lake water was murky, wind blowing against them making the surface choppy. An older man in the rescue team looked around, shaking his head slightly. Steep banks, slippery rocks, deep water. If there's a car, it's buried under the mud by now. The police helicopter circled overhead, its light sweeping the flat water, but only blurry ripples appeared. No metallic glint, no glass shards catching the light. All morning, search teams fanned out along the roads around the lake. A few other tire marks were found, but didn't match the size. An empty wallet was discovered near the shore. Inside only a few soggy papers, no cash, no cards. It was bagged and sealed, but no one could confirm it belonged to Leonard. The sheriff looked it over, and said quietly, don't rule out an accident. Rainy night, slippery road, the car could have plunged into the lake. By noon the rain eased, but fog still drifted over the water. Leonard's mother was brought to the lake shore, wrapped in a dark coat, her face pale from the cold. She looked around, asking softly, if he went in there, will you find him? The young officer replied curtly, we'll try, ma'am. She nodded, her eyes empty. 2 divers went down, groping through the cold mud, but visibility underwater was nearly zero. When they surfaced, breaths ragged, nothing, just rocks and weeds. By afternoon the wind shifted, and rain poured again. Raincoats clung wetly to bodies, soaked through. Old sonar equipment was brought out for a try, the images just gray and black blobs, indistinguishable. A metallic shadow appeared, then vanished with the waves. They dropped marker buoys but got no results. We can't sweep the whole thing, the rescue team leader said, voice weary. The bottom slope's steep, mud thick. If there's a car it's deeper than we think. As night fell, headlights flashed scattered across the water, reflecting trembling golden beams. Police set up barricades, documented the scene, posted search area warning signs. The preliminary report was scribbled hastily in the patrol car, the first page stating clearly, no person or vehicle located. Possible accident. In the county office, a map of Herrington Lake spread wide on the table, dotted with red markers, dive points, sonar sweeps, patrol routes. A young officer looked at it, shaking his head slightly. If it was an accident, why no brake marks? The commander replied evenly, rainy night, slippery road. The car could have slid straight in. The young guy said no more, just looked out the window, where white fog still clung thick to the lake surface. The report was printed, ink still smudged from the damp. At the bottom corner, a small note no one noticed. Southern tire track shows fresh footprints, unclear if human or animal. The paper was clipped shut, filed in the missing person case. Outside, rain pattered on the glass again, muffling the keyboard clicks. As night deepened, the last light in the police room went out, leaving Herrington Lake flat and still, quiet as if no one had ever searched there. The next morning, as weak sunlight broke through, the investigative team returned to the Herrington Lake area to continue the sweep. Thin fog still hung over the water, cold wind from the lake heart, making the grass strips along the shore sway gently. A forensics officer led the way, plastic evidence bag in hand. He crouched close to the muddy patch, near where yesterday's tire track had vanished, the faint sunlight glinting on something in the wet grass. When he picked it up, it was a side mirror fragment, black trim shiny, cracked at one corner. Looking closely, he noticed the brake had no high-speed impact scratches. Instead, the crack spider-webbed in the direction of being pried. Doesn't look like an accident, he said quietly. The lead officer leaned in, tapping the broken edge with his pencil, pried by hand marks, possibly removed before it went in. They exchanged looks, silent. In the missing person file, Leonard Little's car was a black Lexus, same make as the parts they held. A few meters away, another crime scene tech spotted a long gouge in the grass. It started right at the path, dragged straight to the water's edge, about 3 inches wide, grass flattened. When he probed with an iron rod, Underneath was freshly turned soil, not yet dry. "Looks like something heavy was dragged down here," he said, looking up at the lake. The water darkened under the gray light, ripples lapping. The team leader came over, examined it for a moment, then said gravely, "If the car went in naturally, there's no reason for drag marks like this." He turned to his colleague. "Mark the area. Send soil samples for testing. I want to know which tire treads crushed the grass." While they worked, a rescue worker walking the southern lake shore suddenly called out loudly. In his hand was a black leather wallet swollen from water, torn at one corner. Everyone gathered. When opened, inside were only a few rotted papers, a small smudged photo, and a scrap with faded. No cash, no cards, no ID, all bagged and sealed, labeled Evidence 3. The forensics guy said softly, "Wallet's cleaned out. Someone took everything before it washed up here." As the wallet was placed on the portable steel table, the young cop looked toward the lake, where a few birds swooped down, then fluttered up. The air thickened. The group lead spoke, voice hoarse, "I don't believe this was an accident. No brake marks, no airbag deployment. Mirror pried off, empty wallet, and dragged to the water." Someone came back to the scene. Another replied, "To do what? Clean up traces?" He nodded, voice low, "Possibly. Or to make sure everything disappeared." The investigative team spread out around the area, photographing every detail. Grass trampled in multiple directions, but no clear shoe prints. They collected another small flat metal shard, suspected from the car body, stuck with dark red paint flecks. The forensics officer carefully placed it in a plastic box, noting, "Paint chip doesn't match victim's vehicle color." Wind picked up, rain spitting again. Evidence tarps flapped wildly, secured hastily with rocks. Soon after, the pullback order came, water rising, weather turning bad. As everyone packed air, the young cop held the bag with the mirror fragment, looking one last time at the lake. Under the hazy fog, the water lay still as if nothing had happened. "If someone did clean the scene," he said quietly, "that person knows every twist of this road." The team leader just looked at him, saying nothing. They turned away together, vehicle lights reflecting on the wet grass, illuminating the long gouge leading to the water's edge, the starting point of all the unanswered questions. That evening, in the Mercer County office, the new evidence was laid out on the table: side mirror fragment, empty wallet, soil samples, and red paint chip. The interim report noted, possibility of third-party involvement. Scene shows signs of tampering after the main event. But with no body, no car, the case remained classified under missing person suspected traffic accident. After signing the log, the team leader folded the file shut, looked up out the window. Rain started falling again. Out there, Herrington Lake loomed dark, reflecting the dim streetlights, like trembling streaks amid the water. He said softly, almost to himself, "Someone came back, and they did it very cleverly." In the morning, Derrick Caldwell showed up at Mercer County Police Headquarters at the investigators' request. He wore a waterproof leather jacket, faintly scented with motor oil and rust, his face calm to the point of inscrutability. When asked about the last evening he'd spent with Leonard Little, he replied curtly, "He left my place late at night, nothing unusual. We just talked about fixing the compressor, then he drove home." The answer was smooth without a hint of hesitation. The cop asked again, "Did you see any other vehicles on the road at that time?" Derrick frowned slightly. "No, it was raining thick fog. I just stood at the garage door watching his taillights fade away." He said no more, just looked down at the table, his fingers tapping a steady rhythm. Outside, the investigative team kept gathering statements. An elderly woman living near the lake area insisted she'd heard an unusually loud engine noise that night, more like a truck than a sedan, then saw red taillights leaving the road leading down to the lake. She couldn't make out the license plate, but she said firmly, it was red. The report got forwarded to the station, and Derrick was called in again. He gave a wry smile. "I sold that red truck a long time ago. Hundreds of people around here drive ones like that. They must be mistaken." His voice was even, not defensive, but his eyes avoided contact. News of the disappearance spread fast. Local TV aired a short bulletin with an image of the black Lexus and the caption "Lexington man missing near Herrington Lake." The cop's statement was cautious, accident not ruled out. However, within a few days the story shifted direction. A small paper reported that Leonard was in financial trouble, borrowing money to open his own shop. The article implied he might have left to avoid debts. The story got repeated on the morning radio the next day, mixed in with gossip from folks who'd known him. He might have run off to start over. No evidence, just rumors, but it was enough to blur the picture of a suspicious disappearance. In the days that followed, the press dogged Derrick. A reporter cornered him right outside the shop. "Do you think your buddy might have taken off on his own?" He shot back quick. "Possibly. Leonard once said he wanted to leave Lexington, but I don't believe anything bad happened to him." The answer both denied it and left the door open for the hypothesis the press was pushing. The investigators read the news at their desks, saying nothing. No car, no body, no clear evidence. The only things they had were the broken mirror shard, the empty wallet, and the long tire track leading to the water, all just scattered details, not enough to charge anyone. The search work dragged on for a few more days. The rescue team widened the scope, diving deeper in the northern lake area. The old sonar picked up a blurry metal object underwater, but it turned out to be the wreck of a fishing boat sunk years before. A young cop shook his head. "We're just circling with nothing." The commander replied, voice low, "If no new evidence, we gotta shelve the file for now." He paused by the window, eyeing the rain picking up again, then muttered, "The only sure thing here is that the man's gone." 2 weeks later, the rescue team's lights went dark for good. The reflective stakes around the lake's edge got pulled up, the barriers taken down. The final search phase report landed on the commander's desk, signed in a rush that night. The bolded conclusion line: no person or vehicle located, no signs of foul play, possible accident or voluntary departure. In the empty office, the young cop reread his notes: red paint chip, empty wallet, long tire track. Each detail carried a whiff of human involvement. But staring at the category, insufficient evidence for criminal investigation, he set down his pen. Outside the window, the lake's dark surface mirrored the yellow glow of the patrol car pulling away. Wind hauled in cold damp through the door crack, making the thin file flutter faintly. The sheriff murmured as he flicked off the lights, "If he really died, the water'll speak when it's time." The room sank into silence. Out there Herrington Lake lay flat again, as if no one had ever been dragged to the bottom. After the search around Herrington Lake got called off, the Leonard Little file cooled off. In the Mercer County Police Office, the latest report was just a couple lines. No leads, no person or vehicle located. But just a few weeks later, info that seemed like a breakthrough veered the case off its original track. One early morning, the cops got a tip from a driver on a back road south of Lexington, a burned-out car in a scrubby lot. When the investigative team arrived, the vehicle was just a charred shell, frame exposed, whole body blackened, plates warped, VIN faded, almost gone. One tech said, "Mid-size sedan, could be a Lexus, dark color." Word spread quick: burned car found, suspected to be the missing man's. The press ran with it, footage of the smoking wreck blasting across evening news. But once the car got towed to the forensics center, results snuffed out the hype fast. The remaining VIN didn't match Leonard's Lexus. It was a stolen ride from another case, torched to cover tracks. By then though, the public had bought in that Leonard's car was found. A pundit chimed in on the radio, "Could have been an accident that caught fire, no survivors." Public opinion treated it like closure, while the cops stayed mum to avoid feeding useless speculation. Right in the middle of the burned car buzz, an anonymous call to the tip line muddied things further. A man's voice, rushed, "I saw him, the missing guy, at a gas station near Lancaster. He bought smokes, looked totally normal." Cops pulled the station's camera footage right away, spotting a guy with a similar build, but face too blurry to ID. The press pounced, "Witness claims missing man is alive." The headlines dragged on for a few days, then faded like every other baseless rumor. Amid that mess of info, one small detail that could have flipped the whole investigation got overlooked. While combing through Leonard's personal docs, a young cop named Harris spotted a crumpled repair receipt tucked in the papers seized from the victim's apartment. The faded print still read, "Caldwell Motors headlight replacement, cash paid." He flipped to the date and froze, the day Leonard vanished. Harris radioed the investigative unit. "This garage Caldwell's, right?" The voice on the other end was casual. "Yeah, the victim's best buddy." "What's the big deal?" Harris eyed the date again. "Weird," he said. "Leonard just stopped by. Nothing else." The colleague went quiet for a beat, then said low, "Brass, shut this down, kid. Don't stir it up." The receipt got pinned in the supplementary materials file, untouched. In the margin, Harris jotted a short note, "Caldwell link, unverified." No one read it before the file got sealed. The weeks after brought no new evidence. The press stopped mentioning Leonard. At the final wrap-up meeting, the commander read the closure report, voice flat and tired. No person or vehicle located. No signs of foul play, possible accident or voluntary departure. Everyone nodded, no pushback. That night, Harris stayed in the office alone. He stared at the stack in front of him, the photo of Leonard, the side mirror shard, the empty wallet, the rain-smeared long tire track, and the receipt stamped Caldwell Motors. Everything disjointed, like puzzle pieces short of a picture. He picked up the receipt, desk lamp glinting off the smudged ink. A weird chill crept in, like he'd brushed something deliberately buried. But he was just the newbie, no pull to reopen it. In the end, he slid it back in the file, snapped the cover shut, added a note. No additional evidence. As he left the office, the last light clicked off, the room plunging into quiet. Outside, rain started dumping again. Drops hammered heavy on the metal roof, a monotonous drone like the countdown of a case slipping from human memory. On the file shelf, the folder labeled Little, Leonard, missing person sat among hundreds of others, spine dulled by dust. No one cracked it open again. And if anyone had listened close that night, they might have caught the wind whistling through the door crack, carrying the scent of rust and lake water, the smell that lingered only where truths got buried. The Leonard Little file got shelved with hundreds of other missing persons cases in the state police archives, tucked away in a steel box, labeled closed, presumed accident. Every year folks cracked the vault a few times for inventory, dusting and updating codes. No one reread the pages. The crumpled receipt, with Caldwell Motors scrawled on it, stayed put in the file, paper yellowed, edges stuck from damp. It waited silently for a hand to touch it, but for years, no one pulled that drawer twice. Around the same time, Derrick Caldwell kept on in the same town, running his small garage on the main drag out of Lexington. The rusted iron sign glowed steady at night. He still took walk-ins, still fixed rides, still got the call first when someone wrecked on the road by Herrington Lake. To everyone, Derrick was the loyal friend, the guy who hadn't ditched the past, who'd helped search and chipped in cash for Leonard's family in the early months. He showed up to a few prayer vigils at the local church, sitting quiet in the back pew, head bowed, when his lost buddy's name came up. Every time a local reporter dredged up the old story, he stuck to one line, "I just want to know what happened." Leonard was a good guy. Slow voice, steady gaze, no one doubted it. Months rolled by, and Leonard Little's disappearance sank under a flood of fresh news. Folks who'd known him moved away. His elderly mom relocated, to live with kin in another state, health fading, patience worn thin for dead-end calls. Her little house hit the market, white fence moss-covered. Leonard's old framed photo went back on the mantel, dust filming over. Beside it, a small candle stub, burning down year by year, never quite out. In Lexington, some still dropped Leonard's name now and then passing Herrington Lake, but the tone was casual, like rehashing an old yarn. He had an accident, one say, car sank somewhere in the lake, no one knows. Another'd pipe up, water there's deep as hell, hit bottom and radio goes dead. Then the talk dissolved into the wind. No real interest. The stake scars from the search zone got waterlogged, grass swallowing them whole. Sometimes, on still nights, the lake went mirror flat, moonlight spilling down, bouncing off the trees lining both shores. Locals swore that on those nights, you could hear a faint engine sputter echoing from afar, like an old motor cranking in the water. But everyone just half laughed it off, then clammed up. Herrington Lake stayed peaceful, like it had never been stirred. Meanwhile, Derrick grew more trusted in the community. He sponsored the town's youth ball team, pitched in on road repairs, joined the church charity drive. His photo ran in the local rag with a caption, "The dedicated mechanic, best friend to the long-ago missing victim." Whenever Leonard came up, he'd sigh, "I still think if it hadn't rained that night, he'd have made it home safe." The line got repeated plenty, like a refrain. The young cop Harris, who'd found the receipt back then, quit the force a couple years later. He never brought up Leonard Little again, but in his head, he still saw the faded print on that damp paper and smelled the machine oil soaked in. He'd thought about flagging it higher, but there wasn't cause. Case closed, no proof, no witnesses, no body. It all boiled down to a sad lakeside tale. 10 years passed, then 10 more. Time slapped moss thick over everything, memories included. Leonard's house changed hands, new owners clueless about who'd lived there before. His old photo in the police file faded, face blurring behind the plastic sleeve, and Herrington Lake, unchanged. Summers, kids splashed near the docks. Winters, fog blanketed thick, cold wind hauling metallic damp. Under the deep water, black mud layered on year by year, sealing whatever belonged to Leonard Little. The surface stayed eerily still, like it was guarding something no one remembered to hunt. There, the water had covered the first layer of secrets. Nearly 30 years after the forgotten Leonard Little case, the state of Kentucky established the Cold Case Unit, a specialized team reviewing unsolved files and applying modern forensic technology. Among the list of hundreds of cases, a dust-covered thick file labeled Little Leonard, missing person presumed accident sat near the end. The edges of the paper cover were frayed, the ink faded, but inside remained a piece of the rearview mirror, a receipt from Caldwell Motors, and a brief scene report. Detective Sarah Nolan, the investigator newly transferred from the forensics lab to Cold Case, was assigned to review this one. When she opened the file, she caught the scent of old paper mixed with a hint of metallic mildew. The first photo was of the Herrington Lake scene, thick fog, grassy shore, a few wooden stakes marking tire tracks. At the end of the report, she paused at a handwritten note. Southern tire tracks show fresh impressions, unclear if human or animal, a minor detail never mentioned in the official transcript. Sarah pulled out the old topographic map of Herrington Lake, where the sonar scanned areas from back then were marked in red ink. She noticed a large gap in the southwest section of the lake, right next to the dirt road leading to the grassy area where the tire tracks vanished. On the map, that zone was noted briefly, too deep. She called the tech office to confirm. Was this area ever scanned? No. The voice on the line replied. The sonar back then couldn't scan that deep. They skipped it, thinking if the car went in it would drift away. Sarah jotted a note. Unsurveyed area, suspicious. Moving to the witness section, she saw only 2 names. Derrick Caldwell and a woman who lived near the lake. No formal interview transcripts, just a few summary lines. Derrick, close friend, confirmed victim left normally. In the woman's statement, the end was cut off, red truck drove away. No one had ever followed up with her. In the margin, someone had added in different handwriting, sold the truck. Sarah circled that line. That afternoon, she reopened the property records and found the Caldwell Motors receipt, headlight replacement, paid in cash. The date on the receipt matched the disappearance date. He said Leonard just stopped by, she whispered. But there's a receipt for work. Things were starting to form a vague logical chain. At the next morning's meeting, Sarah presented her findings. The scene report's coordinates are off by nearly 200 meters from the actual location. She pointed at the enlarged map. And this water area was never properly sonar scanned. A colleague asked, "What do you think's down there?" Sarah replied firmly, "If the car did go in, it's still there. We have the tech to check." Back at her desk, she pulled up Kentucky's latest digital topographic map. Satellite imagery showed the narrow dirt road sloping straight down to the lake's edge, just like in the old photos. She entered the coordinates, marked the too deep area in red, and noted, "Recommend multi-frequency sonar survey and ROV drone." As she zoomed in on the image, the blue light from the screen reflected off her face, her eyes focused, cold and bright. Sarah reviewed the original investigators list, all names now retired. She stopped at the line Harris, evidence officer. Nearly 30 years ago, it was Harris who had noted the Caldwell receipt in the file. She checked the personnel system. He'd left the force long ago, no address left. She told herself she'd track him down later, but for now, the priority was the lake. That evening, Sarah reread the old summary. No signs of foul play, possible accident. Every line ended in judgment, not evidence. She leaned back in her chair, the dim lamp casting shadows over the old file. In her mind, she replayed the foggy lake image, where someone once said they'd searched everywhere. But now, with new technology, she knew they'd only searched almost everywhere. She picked up a pen and wrote boldly and decisively on the file's first page. Cold case reinvestigation, Leonard Little. Southwest area of Herrington Lake, never scanned. Recommend reopening scene investigation. Early the next morning, the report went straight to her superiors. In the conclusion, Sarah noted briefly, old technology may have missed the vehicle. High probability, the car is still in the lake. She signed Det. Sarah Nolan, then hit send. Outside, thick fog blanketed the headquarters hallway. Through the window, she watched the sun fade behind gray clouds. In her mind, the image of Harrington Lake sharpened like a silent challenge. For 30 years, the water had kept its secrets, but this time, it wouldn't stay quiet. The proposal to reopen the Leonard Little file was approved faster than Sarah Nolan expected. Her report caught the cold case unit leadership's attention. The southwest area of Harrington Lake had never been properly sonar scanned, and the coordinate discrepancies in the old transcript were enough to justify reopening the investigation. But to carry it out, she needed technology the police department didn't have. So Sarah contacted Rapid Recovery KY, a renowned civilian search group specializing in sonar and ROV drones for underwater detection. The first call connected to Adam Brooks, the group's founder. His voice was low, deliberate but confident. "If the car's really down there, sonar will give you the answer." Sarah immediately sent the topographic map, old scene photos, and notes on the overlooked too deep area from the 1997 report. 2 hours later, Adam called back. "This area slopes at 30 degrees, over 20 feet deep. A car could slide in and get buried in mud that old-school sonar wouldn't detect. We'll bring the gear down." 3 days later, Rapid Recovery KY's truck pulled up along Herrington Lake shore. With Adam was Jeremy Cole, the sonar technician. They brought a multi-frequency Humminbird, imaging 3D sonar, a chasing M2 ROV drone, and a GPS system accurate to the meter. Sarah met them at the lakeside parking lot, a large printed map in hand. Cool wind blew off the water, carrying scents of mud and metal. Adam spread the map across the truck's hood and explained, "We'll divide the area into a 10 x 10 meter grid, call it sonar grid. The boat will move through each cell, sonar scanning the lake bottom for metal objects. If we spot a suspicious shape, we'll send the drone down to check." Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the gray-silver lake surface. "If the car's here," she said slowly, "it's been waiting for us for 2 decades. That afternoon, the team began deployment. The sonar was mounted on the boat's side, power cable linked to a laptop displaying real-time data. Steady pings echoed as sound waves cut through the water. The screen showed patches of light and dark, each a rock surface, mud flat, or sunken object. Sarah stood on shore, logging GPS coordinates. Nearly an hour passed, with only rippled lake bottom images and natural depressions. As the day's sunlight began to fade, Jeremy suddenly paused. On the screen, a blurry dark mass appeared, about 5 meters long, tilted to one side. "Mark this spot," he said quickly. Adam zoomed in on the image, squinting. "Sharp edges, 45-degree angle, not natural. Could be a car, or a big rock." The team went silent for a few seconds. Sarah stepped closer, staring at the screen, her heart pounding. "We come back here tomorrow morning," she said. That night, they camped right by the lake shore. Sarah opened her laptop to review the sonar data. The dark band sharpened with signal processing, flat, compact, roughly the size of a sedan body. She noted, "Suspected vehicle object, coordinates 37, 65-degree N, 84, 70-degree W, needs ROV verification." Night wind carried cold mist across the still lake. In the darkness, lights from a house on the opposite shore reflected faintly on the water, like eyes watching them. The next morning, fog still hung thick as Adam prepped the drone. The yellow device was tethered with fiber optic cable, fitted with a 4K camera and high-power LED lights. "Down about 20 feet, he said. "If it's metal, the reflection will be different." Sarah stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes tracking the drone as it slowly submerged. The laptop screen showed murky mud layers, scattered rocks, then drifting water weeds. The drone moved slowly, light sweeping empty spaces. Suddenly, Jeremy whispered, "See that, to the right." A smooth dark shape appeared in the frame's corner, flat and even, light glancing off it dimly. Adam steadied the controls, adjusting the camera angle. "Looks like a metal surface," he murmured, "but we need to be sure. Tag these coordinates." Sarah leaned in, voice low, "Record every frame. Don't miss a thing." After 10 minutes, the drone surfaced, water dripping from its body. Adam shut off the motor, gazing at the lake. "If it's the car, it's been sitting down there over 25 years, he said quietly. Sarah nodded, and no one ever looked in the right spot. They backed up all the data, printed the sonar grid map, and marked the suspicious zone with red symbols. As the sun broke through, Herrington Lake returned to its peaceful look, only small ripples left where the drone had emerged. But no one in the group voiced what they were all thinking. Maybe, right below, was the answer to 3 decades of silence: a car, a missing man, and a truth the water had guarded too long. The next day, thick fog blanketed Herrington Lake, the water flat and cold as gray glass. The Rapid Recovery K team returned to the marked position, ready to confirm what sonar had detected the day before. No one spoke much. The boat's engine hummed into the steady wind, leaving only tension in the air. Sarah Nolan stood on shore, radio in hand, eyes locked on the lake. Down there, over 20 feet deep, sonar had shown a metallic shape, possibly a car, or an odd rock. Adam Brooks recalibrated the sonar, rescanning the area once more. The laptop screen clearly displayed the 5-meter-long shape, slightly tilted, with a solid metal echo. Jeremy Cole, the technician, murmured, "Not rock. This has square angles." Adam nodded, prepped the drone. The yellow chasing M2 ROV was lowered into the water. Fiber optic cable slipped through Adam's hands as the LED lights sank into the murky depths. On screen, the camera revealed hazy mud, drifting moss patches. The drone dove deeper, sonar pinged steady. At 20 feet, the image sharpened, a flat surface covered in green moss and silt. Jeremy adjusted the camera angle, panning slowly right. A glint flashed, the edge of metal reflecting the light. "Hold it there," Adam said softly. The drone edged forward inches. The screen showed the tail of an old Lexus sedan, moss-encrusted, black-gray paint blending into the mud. Sarah leaned in, almost whispering, "Find the license plate." Adam maneuvered the drone around the car's side, gently clearing silt with the prop wash. Faded numbers emerged, KY 432 BZN. Sarah drew a deep breath, voice hoarse. Perfect match with the file. No one spoke. The drone continued its slow scan along the body. The right side door hung ajar, frame dented, a corner of the driver's seat visible under the silt. As Jeremy panned left, the light swept over something protruding from the mud base, a pale gray round mass. He froze. Wait, what's that? The drone closed in, silt parting into a fine cloud. In the dim white light, a human hand appeared clearly, skin pallid, half buried in mud. The team fell silent. Adam held his breath for seconds, then whispered, "That's human." Turning to Sarah, his voice low and firm, "We found him." Sarah didn't respond right away. She stared at the screen image. The hand lay still, index finger slightly curled, as if pointing toward the car. For a moment, all sound seemed to fade. Then she grabbed the radio, voice calm but steely. "This is Nolan. Seal off the entire Herrington Lake area. Coordinates 37.65, N84.70. Suspected vehicle and human remains located in Leonard Little case." On the other end, dispatch replied curtly, "Confirmed. Forensics and state police en route." Adam held the drone in place, recording video from multiple angles. As the camera panned down, the body came into fuller view, lying on its side against the car's flank, torso mostly silt-covered, left arm extended out the door, head facing the driver's seat. No signs of restraints, but the position unnatural, like it had been shoved out as the door opened. Jeremy muttered, "If it was an accident, why's the door open?" Sarah replied quietly, "It wasn't an accident." The drone circled the car body slowly. The rear had a large dent, steel edge bent inward, sign of heavy impact before sinking. Adam logged coordinates, saving all image data. When the drone surfaced, water pattered on the deck, catching the faint morning light through the fog. Sarah ordered the area sealed. No one goes in the water until forensics arrives. Adam nodded. Jeremy posted warning signs. Across the shore, curious locals paused to watch, unaware of what was happening. A patrol officer was dispatched to block access. Sarah stood motionless, gazing at the lake. Light wind stirred, mixing scents of mud and old gasoline in the air. In her mind flashed the old reports with their "no signs of foul play" conclusions. Now, beneath that water, everything had an answer. She opened her notebook, writing briefly, 9:47 a.m., Lexus vehicle and human remains located. Preliminary ID, Leonard Little. As she closed the notebook, the wind picked up, the lake surface rippling. Adam packed gear, eyes still fixed on the discovery zone. "I found plenty of cars," he said softly, "but none ever gave me chills like this." Sarah looked at him, voice low, "Because this time someone wanted us never to find it." She looked up at the water spreading wide ripples. For 25 years, Herrington Lake had stayed silent. But this morning, it had spoken, with that hand rising from the cold mud, the hand of a man no one had ever truly searched for until now. Herrington Lake was completely cordoned off. Yellow tape stretched around the shore, police blocked the roads, leaving only the technical team and the cold case unit. The lake surface was flat, thick fog blanketing it. The crane engine's rumble echoed, blending with the wind and the water slapping against the boat hull. Sarah Nolan stood beside Adam Brooks, watching the divers preparing to go underwater. The car is tilted toward the north, the right side dented. Adam pointed to the sonar map. "We'll attach cables to the axle and pull it up at a 30-degree angle." Sarah nodded. 3 divers submerged, bubbles rising in rings, spreading out gradually. The water rippled lightly, an orange buoy marking the car's position. The steel cables tightened, pulling slowly. Mud stirred up, a stagnant, musty water smell wafting. Bit by bit, the massive black shadow detached from the lake bottom. Water bubbled, then the Lexus body gradually emerged. Moss clung thickly, glass shattered, right door twisted. When the car broke the surface, water cascaded from the roof, revealing the license plate KY432BZN. Sarah confirmed, matches Leonard Little's file. The crane engine stopped, the car set down on a large tarp on the shore. Police set up a perimeter to secure the scene. Reporters held back over 100 meters. The technicians began working. A low-pressure hose was used to wash away the thick mud layer, exposing the peeling black-painted body. The license plate remained intact. Bolts rusted. The right car door was pried open with cutting tools, hinges seized. Inside was empty, only a few broken plastic shards, and a seatbelt cut halfway. A specialist shone a light, murmuring, "The passenger seat has a deep indentation. Someone sat there." Sarah stepped to the right side of the car, where the dent was pronounced. A crescent-shaped dent, metal pressed inward, paint edges flaking. Narrow angle impact, strong force from the side, she said softly, like it was pushed. A few meters from the car, a diver spotted the body, lying on its side, half buried in mud, arm extended toward the car. When it was brought up, everyone fell silent. A white sheet draped over it, only the rapid camera flashes audible. Sarah bowed her head, voice low, door open, body outside. An accident wouldn't leave it like this. Forensic work began. They photographed every detail, car door, dent, body position. Another team took mud samples around the right side with vacuum tubes, sealing them labeled Evidence 10A. Moss and flaking paint from the passenger door were collected separately, coded 10B. Police wrote reports on site. When the trunk was opened, they found small items, a rusted wrench, a charred plastic shard, and half a water-blurred paper sheet. Sarah used tweezers to lift it out, reading the faint remaining words, called, motors. She stood frozen, eyes fixed on the paper. Adam realized, murmuring, Caldwell. Sarah nodded, voice hoarse, just like the receipt in the file. The forensics team continued sampling the passenger seatbelt and door frame. Under the light, they spotted red paint flecks on the metal. Not from this car, the specialist reported. Sarah immediately ordered separation. Send it to analysis. I want to know the origin of this paint. All evidence was sealed, placed in clear plastic boxes. As the sun rose, light hit the water-dripping frame, metal gleaming in flashes. A young officer eyed the stripped frame, murmuring, "It's been here 25 years." Sarah replied slowly, and silent all that time. The car was tarped and sealed, loaded onto a specialized truck, leaving the lake. The body was transported separately to the State Medical Examiner's Center in Frankfort. As the convoy faded, Sarah still stood gazing at the still lake surface, water left with only small ripples. Adam approached, voice low, "Who do you think it is?" Sarah didn't answer, just stared at the disturbed water trail, and said, "The lake doesn't hide anyone on its own. Someone had to want it that way." She opened her notebook, wrote the final line, "Recovery complete. License plate match, car empty, body 5 m away. Deep right side dent, red paint mismatch. Sampling process concluded." She closed the notebook, turned her back, and left the shore. Behind her, the crane engine fell silent. Herrington Lake returned to peace, but the water that day was no longer that of a tranquil lake. It had just given back a truth buried for over 2 decades. The Kentucky State Medical Examiner's Center in Frankfort was lit up all night. That day, Autopsy Room 3B was specially sealed for the Leonard Little case. A cold case reopened after nearly 30 years. The body arrived in advanced decomposition, but bones and soft tissue remained sufficient for determining key details. Dr. Raj Patel, chief examiner, performed it directly. Sarah Nolan was present throughout, quietly observing from behind the antimicrobial glass, noting every step. Patel began with overall photography. Male body, around 30 years old, height about 5'10". Decomposition level fits long-term submersion. He used a scalpel to separate the chest, examining the lungs closely. "No water in the lungs," he said, voice deep, meaning he was dead before the car sank. Sarah leaned forward slightly, jotting down every word. The right ribs were fractured in 2 places, sternum cracked. Direct impact force, strong and low, like a shove from the side, Patel said. On the neck bones, a light scratch ran parallel to the collar edge. He continued checking the remaining fabric on the body. Dark cloth, frayed and encrusted. When shaken lightly, a small object fell onto the stainless tray, a red paint chip, size of a grain of sand. Nearby, light from the scope reflected tiny glittering specks around the collar. Microscopic shattered glass, he determined. Likely ejected from the impact. Samples were collected separately, sealed. Patel moved to examining the passenger seatbelt retrieved from the scene. Under surgical light, the strap showed a cross-cut surface smeared with faded bloodstains. He swabbed it with a cotton tip. "We'll run DNA analysis." In the evidence analysis room, technicians prepped the SAMS electron microscope to examine the red paint chip. Sarah stood close to the observation glass. On the screen, the chip showed clear layers, a deep red metallic base coat, underneath a white-gray primer. Patel pointed to the magnified image. "See, it's a duplex layer, automotive paint with metal flake." He compared it to a standard sample from the victim's Lexus paint. Leonard's Lexus has a black base, not red, so this came from another vehicle. Sarah asked softly, "A truck?" Patel nodded. "Likely. This deep red is common on 90s, Chevy Silverados, or Ford F-150S. When DNA testing finished, the report displayed two profiles, one from victim tissue, the other from the passenger seatbelt. Comparison results, different DNA, both male. Sarah read the bolded text, silent for seconds. "So someone sat in the passenger seat," Patel added, "and left after he died." That afternoon, they analyzed soft tissue details around the wounds. Chest tissue was crushed, deep bruising. Under the microscope, muscle fibers were shredded horizontally, sign of pre-death severe trauma. Patel leaned in to note, blunt force trauma, sustained prior to death. He turned to Sarah. "If it was just an underwater accident, rib fractures from impact pressure when the car sank would differ. This is active fracturing, inflicted while alive." Sarah opened the old accident map, pointing to the right side dent position. "Matches the injury direction," she said. "He could have been rammed from the right side. Car lost control, slid into the lake. On impact, door opened, body ejected." Patel reviewed the 3D model on screen. Perfect match. But the seatbelt cut. No one cuts a belt during an accident. It could have been cut after he was unconscious, to push the body out. A technician brought additional FTIR spectroscopy results. The red paint's chemical structure matched mid-size trucks produced in the U.S. from 1996, 1999. Sarah eyed the numbers, immediately recalling Derrick Caldwell's old statement that he'd sold his red truck after the disappearance. Dr. Patel continued examining glass shards around the collar. Under polarized light, he identified it as 2-ply safety glass, typically for headlights. Shattered glass stuck to the collar means he faced the impact direction, he said. Likely in the driver's seat, rammed head-on from the side. Sarah wrote quickly, "Impact from the right, victim fatally injured before car sank." When all samples were tested, Patel compiled the file. He murmured, almost to himself, "No water in lungs, no foam in trachea. Victim deceased before vehicle entry. 3 right ribs fractured, lung contusion. Red paint chip on shirt from mid-size truck. Different male DNA on passenger seatbelt, all points one way." Sarah looked up, "Homicide." Patel nodded, "Exactly. Blunt force trauma prior to submersion." He signed the conclusion sheet, then slid a copy toward her. Sarah stood still, gazing at the final line on the report. Cause of death, homicide. Blunt force trauma prior to submersion. Contributing factors, external collision vehicle to vehicle. Manner, intentional impact, probable second-party presence. She breathed deeply, closing the file. In her mind scattered pieces began fitting the red truck, Caldwell Motors receipt, paint on the shirt, cut seatbelt. Every trace led to one person, Derrick Caldwell, close friend, last to see Leonard. Patel removed his gloves, voice low. I've done over 100 similar cases, but rarely see results this clear. He didn't die in an accident. Someone killed him then staged it. Sarah nodded faintly. And that someone thought water would hide it all. Outside, light rain fell, drops tapping the medical examiner's room window frame. Sarah clutched the file stack, stepping into the long, coldly lit hallway. In her head, the sonar ping echoed from memory like the lake's slow heartbeat. She knew the Leonard Little case had veered a new direction. For the first time in nearly 30 years, the truth was rising from the water. The Lexus was transported to the Kentucky State Crime Scene Technical Center the next morning. After Dr. Patel completed the autopsy, the case shifted to Det. Ron Miles, renowned accident reconstruction expert. Sarah Nolan arrived early, observing as Miles circled the mud-covered car, resting on the metal floor, water still dripping from the undercarriage. The body structure is intact, Miles said, tapping the frame lightly, a dull thud echoing. But deep right side dent, long rear door scratches. This impact came laterally, not from the lake drop. Sarah nodded, matches the victim's rib fracture position. They collected paint samples around the dent area. Miles scraped ultra-thin flakes, sending them to FTIR spectroscopy. When results appeared, the graph separated clearly, the Lexus's metallic black layer, and a deep red overlay. See, he said, the new mark overlays the old, meaning the ram happened before submersion. Sarah asked, can you determine relative timing? Yes, Miles replied, the red layer is barely oxidized. If long ago, water would have stripped it. This hit occurred right before the sink. Chemical analysis confirmed the red paint sample matched exactly the paint used on 1997 Chevy Silverados. Sarah frowned. The truck Derrick Caldwell said he sold after the disappearance. Miles chuckled softly. If he really sold it, the buyer sure left his paint on this Lexus. He began scanning the entire frame with a 3D laser scanner, creating a digital impact model. On screen, the Lexus appeared vivid, dent area highlighted red, force direction marked by green arrows. Miles rotated the model, simulating impact force at 35 degrees, speed about 30 miles per hour. Side hit caused half spin then slide down the slope. Sarah eyed the 3D image, asking, no brake marks? Miles replied, none. Driver didn't react, or wasn't conscious. At the right side, software showed the dent penetrating the load-bearing frame. Miles pointed, lateral hit at bumper height of a truck. This was a taller vehicle than the Lexus, so it struck mid-door. He placed a Silverado front bumper photo beside curves matched perfectly. This collision couldn't be accidental, he said. It was a deliberate ram. Sarah watched the simulation of the car sliding down the dirt slope to the lake. In slow motion, the body tilted, nose dipping first, water flooding in, door popping open. Body ejected on the drop, she said. Miles nodded, right, and the passenger had time to cut the seatbelt, open the door, then escape. During undercarriage inspection, Miles found more black paint scraped raw, mud mixed with sand. Car was dragged a few meters before falling, he said. Someone pushed it or towed it to the water's edge. Sarah recalled the old report noting long furrow marks in grass, a detail once overlooked. So the car was staged, she concluded. Supplemental spectroscopy confirmed the red paint's oxidation extremely low, corresponding to impact right before water entry. Miles emphasized, meaning the ram and sinking were nearly simultaneous. This wasn't an accident, it was calculated. The latter inspection focused on airbag sensors. Miles pointed to the Lexus's old wiring diagram. This system only deploys on frontal impacts. Side hit, no airbag. Driver took severe trauma, broken bones, loss of consciousness, matches Dr. Patel's description. He shut off the screen, gaze sharp. Everything aligns. Late afternoon, the completed impact model was presented on a large screen. A simulation video played the red Chevy charging, slamming the Lexus's right side, body half spinning, sliding down the slope, plunging into water, sending large waves. Miles said, "This ram killed the driver on impact." The other vehicle paused, then turned away. Sarah stood silent, watching the simulated red impact path. She murmured, "The only one there that night was Derrick Caldwell." Miles saved the files. Voice firm, science doesn't lie. Dual paint layers, low oxidation, side impact, car dragged to lake. This was murder, not accident. He printed the technical conclusion, signed it, then handed it to Sarah. On the first page, bold text read, "Vehicle collision reconstruction report. Probable, intentional impact." Sarah flipped to the last page, reading Miles's concise lines. "Force direction right to left. Impact vehicle, Chevy Silverado, 1996, 1999. Damage level 6/10, leading to loss of control. Hypothetical scenario, deliberate collision." She breathed deeply, closing the document. The pieces were closing in. The ram, the paint, Caldwell Motors receipt, old statement about the sold truck. Nothing was coincidence anymore. Outside the window, sky began darkening. Sarah clutched the report, stepping from the center, late day sun, glinting on glass, reflecting a shimmering red, the paint color of a truck once vanished from records, but still leaving indelible traces on Leonard Little's Lexus. After the collision appraisal report was released, Sarah Nolan knew she was close to the truth, but she was still missing the final piece, the one that proved the impact wasn't an accident. That evidence came from an unexpected call. One morning, the cold case unit switchboard received a call from Raymond Carter, a retired fisherman living near Herrington Lake. His voice trembled but was firm. "I heard about that car found under the lake. I think I saw 2 cars there that night." Sarah went to meet him right away. Carter's small wooden house sat on a hillside overlooking the lake. He opened the door, cane in hand, nodded in greeting, and spoke slowly. "It was raining that night. I couldn't sleep. The dog kept barking, so I looked out the window, saw 2 cars parked right by the shore, one black, one red. The black one was a sedan, and the red one was a truck, with its lights shining straight down into the water. I figured they were night fishing. Then only the red one drove off. The black one turned off its lights and went still. I even told my wife it must be someone stuck in the mud." Sarah pulled out a map, and he pointed right to the area where the sonar had detected the Lexus. "The next morning, I saw tire tracks sliding straight into the lake. I reported it to the police, but no one followed up." Sarah knew she now had a witness confirming the 2 vehicles. She immediately pulled up Derrick Caldwell's DMV records. In the database, his red Chevy Silverado was noted as reported stolen on May 6, 1997, 4 days after Leonard Little disappeared. Reason: vehicle stolen from garage lot. She requested a reverse trace on the insurance records. The insurer confirmed they'd paid out on the stolen vehicle claim just a week later, with no additional investigation. "Too quick," Sarah said. "A perfect stolen car to erase the trail." From this lead, she contacted the Louisville Metal Recycling Bureau, which stored junked vehicle records. The records clerk, Angela Ruiz, after checking, found an old entry, red Chevy Silverado, scrapped in March 1998. Rusted frame, no engine, no owner. When Angela read off the VIN, Sarah cross-checked it against the DMV. It matched the first 9 characters with Derrick's truck. She stood silent for a few seconds, then said softly, "That stolen truck was never stolen. He took it there himself." The next day, Sarah drove to Louisville. In the old scrapyard, amid piles of rusted metal, Angela led her to the forensic materials storage area. She pulled out a piece of brown rusted steel frame, marked #R97. "From that red Silverado," she said. Sarah bagged the sample and took it back to the lab. 2 days later, the analysis results came back. Under spectral microscopy, the paint layer structure, adhesive compounds, and metal matched perfectly with the red paint samples found on the victim's shirt and the Lexus's side. The report bolded, "Match, same vehicle origin." Sarah read it, silent for a long time. Every piece had clicked into place. She called Det, "Ron Miles, we found the truck. It wasn't stolen. Derrick scrapped it in Louisville, Miles replied, over the phone, voice low. And now we know it was the murder weapon. The next day, Sarah presented the report to her superiors. She spread the entire file across the table, the spectral analysis, collision simulation photos, the stolen vehicle report, and the scrapyard record. The paint samples, metal compounds, and impact direction all match, she said. This Silverado rammed the side of Leonard's Lexus, then got reported stolen a few days later. A year after that, it shows up in Louisville, frame rusted, engine stripped. The commander read it carefully, voice heavy. So the missing vehicle was the murder weapon. Sarah replied, and the only one who could have driven it that night was Derrick Caldwell. Stepping out of the room, Sarah felt the case buried like thick mud for all those years. Finally stirred up. Everything fit perfectly, the ram, the red paint, the lies about the sold truck. But the truth was sharper than steel, it didn't rust with time. That night, she sat alone in her office, staring at Leonard Little's photo on the desk. Wind whistled through the door crack, rain pattered on the eaves outside. She opened her notebook and wrote the final note. The stolen truck was never stolen. It was the murder weapon. Sarah closed the notebook and leaned back in her chair. The rain outside still fell, but in her heart, the shadows were starting to take shape. The shape of the red Silverado that had barreled through the rainy night, carrying a secret that now nothing could hide. When the results from the forensics lab arrived, Sarah Nolan knew she was about to lay hands on irrefutable incriminating evidence. Dr. Raj Patel called her early that morning, voice grave. The DNA results from the passenger seatbelt are in. Sarah asked quickly, does it match Caldwell? Perfect match, he replied. Error probability, under 1 in a billion. The epithelial cells are intact, indicating the person sat in that spot right when the vehicle was in use. Sarah went still. In the old file, the line unknown male DNA was now replaced with Derrick Caldwell's name. She requested a re-verification of the chain of custody, the evidence handling chain, to ensure no gaps. The detailed report showed, seatbelt sample, designated item 4C was collected at the scene, properly sealed, and transferred directly to the state forensics lab on 9/12, with the seal codes matching the open case file entirely. No discrepancies, no contamination, Patel confirmed. Caldwell sat in the passenger seat. In parallel, Sarah requested a re-examination of the red paint chip. The sample taken from the rusted Chevy Silverado frame in the Louisville scrapyard was compared, via FTIR spectroscopy and SM-EDS microscopy, to the paint chip recovered from Leonard's shirt. Results: iron oxide composition, base adhesive layer, and molecular structure matched perfectly. The report bolded, match confirmed, same vehicle origin. She spread the documents across the table. Sample A, red paint chip from the victim's shirt. Sample B, paint layer stuck to the right side of the Lexus. Sample C, Silverado frame at Louisville. 3 samples, 3 different sources, all pointing to one vehicle, the one Derrick Caldwell reported stolen 4 days after Leonard disappeared. That afternoon, Sarah and Det. Ron Miles met again in the cold case unit office. On the large screen, scene photos, DNA charts, and a 3D collision model displayed simultaneously. Miles pointed to the passenger area in the model. The seatbelt was cut in the middle, with Caldwell's DNA on the buckle. He sat there. Sarah stared at the image and said softly, "The car kept the passenger who rode beside him." The room fell silent. Miles replied slowly, "And now, it's pointing straight at him." Sarah continued laying out the investigation logic. Derrick was in the passenger seat. Leonard died before the car sank. After the ram, he dragged Leonard to the driver's seat, buckled the seatbelt to fake it, then let the car slide into the water. He opened the door, got out, and let the Lexus vanish into the lake. Miles nodded. He thought the water would erase the traces, but he didn't know the seatbelt would hold onto his DNA. To bolster the file, Sarah requested the tech unit to recreate the event sequence using forensic sync software, integrating terrain data, collision simulation, and the 1997 map. The model showed two vehicles stopped by the lake shore. The red Silverado backed up slightly, then accelerated, ramming the Lexus's side. The sedan spun half a turn, slid down the slope, and plunged into the water. The passenger side occupant opened the door, cut the seatbelt, pushed the body out, and fled the scene. Total time, under 40 seconds. Sarah watched the 3D model, voice measured, a perfectly staged murder, and for 25 years, no one knew. Miles nodded, eyes sharp and cold, but science doesn't forget. That evening, Sarah finalized the comprehensive report. The first page bolded, Forensics Results Report, Case File, Leonard Little, 1997, DNA, passenger seatbelt sample matches Derrick Caldwell, paint red paint chip from victim's shirt, and Silverado frame at Louisville match completely. Chain of custody, no violations, no procedural errors. Conclusion, intentional act. Victim died from impact trauma before vehicle submersion. Sarah read it over, then drew a line under the end. His own car held onto him. She left the office as night had fallen. In the hallway, rain drummed against the glass doors, the same sound tied to the night Leonard vanished. Sarah paused at the window, looking out at the soaked parking lot. 30 years ago, an accident left forgotten. And now, every detail, from the smallest paint chip to the DNA strand stuck to the seatbelt, told the same story. A story about a friend who killed his friend, and about a car that didn't just bury the crime, but preserved the evidence against it forever. That morning, the interrogation room at the Lexington police station was bathed in cold white light. On the table sat only 2 cups of cold coffee, and the thick case file, the Leonard Little case, now officially reopened with a new header, Homicide Investigation. Derrick Caldwell walked in, still carrying that confident posture, shirt neatly pressed like a man with nothing to hide. Sarah Nolan sat across from him, hands folded, eyes calm. "Thanks for coming," she said, voice light. "I just need to verify a few details about your friend, Leonard Little." Derrick nodded slightly, sat down, a faint smile. "After all these years, you folks still won't let it go. I've said it before, I had nothing to do with it. He owed money to someone else, or had some trouble, I don't know." Sarah opened the file, not responding right away. She flipped a few pages, and slid a photo of the seatbelt toward him. "We found your DNA on this piece of evidence. The passenger seatbelt in Leonard's car." Derrick glanced at it, shrugged. "I rode in his car plenty of times. What's to say it isn't from back then?" Sarah looked him straight in the eye. "The DNA sample has intact epithelial cells, no oxidation. It was deposited right at the time the car went into the water." Derrick stiffened a bit, but kept his voice steady. "I don't know anything about that. I reported my truck stolen, remember? The police back then confirmed it clear as day." Sarah tilted her head slightly, opened her laptop, and projected a cell tower signal map from the night Leonard disappeared onto the wall. "This is the signal from Tower 47 at Herrington Lake, logged at 2341. 2 devices were detected at the same location, one belonging to Leonard Little, one to you. They moved along the same route, at the same time, and stopped in the lake area for over 20 minutes. Derrick slowly furrowed his brow. "My phone back then, I left it in the garage. Maybe someone took it." Sarah gave a thin smile. "Funny thing is, your GPS signal left the lake area just 5 minutes after Leonard's went dark, and the next day, you reported the red Chevy stolen. 4 days later, the missing person case was closed." The air in the room thickened. Derrick leaned back, arms crossed. "You're building a story." Sarah slid another paper over, the paint spectroscopy comparison. "The red paint chip on Leonard's shirt matches the paint from your truck, the one you said got stolen. And this," she pointed to the image, "is the rusted Silverado frame in Louisville, scrapped in 1998. Same VIN." Derrick swallowed hard, eyes flicking quickly to the corner of the room where the camera was. "This is ridiculous. You think I kept a truck for a whole year just to sell it off?" Sarah stayed calm. "No, I think you sold it, after you were sure no one would find the Lexus. A long silence. The hum of the air conditioner. Derrick leaned back, voice dropping lower. I didn't kill him. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. He owed me money, then lied about it. I just meant to pull him over and talk. Things got out of hand. Sarah didn't react. She said softly, so the ram into the side of the Lexus was a lesson, and dragging the car into the lake, that was part of the teaching too. Derrick exhaled sharply, trying to hold steady, but his voice trembling slightly. It wasn't me. I left first. He lost control. She closed the file, speaking slowly. That's odd. Because the collision report shows the Lexus was hit from the right, from the same direction your truck was moving. Couldn't have been lost control. You know, Derrick, water can hide a body, but it can't hide physics. Derrick turned his face away, hands clenching on his thighs. For a moment, his usual confidence vanished, replaced by a blank stare. Sarah didn't need a confession. She just needed him to contradict himself. You say you left first, she continued, but you know he lost control. You couldn't know that if you weren't there. Derrick looked at her, gave a thin smile. You won't prove a damn thing. Sarah replied, voice calm to the point of cold. We already have. The DNA, the paint, the cell signals, and now your words. She stood, gathered the file, and signaled the tech to stop recording. As the door opened, Derrick called after her. You don't get it. Lenny wasn't as innocent as you think. Sarah paused without turning back. Maybe, she said quietly, but you're definitely guilty. In the hallway outside, the white light spilled onto the metal benches. Sarah sat down, took a deep breath. The recording would go straight to the state prosecutor, along with the full physical evidence file. Even without a confession, Derrick Caldwell had tied himself to the case with his own confidence and contradictions. A young officer approached, asking softly, did he say anything big? Sarah closed her notebook, replied curtly, enough for the file to speak the rest. She looked through the glass, seeing Derrick sitting alone in the interrogation room, hands gripping the cold coffee cup tight. On the table, the statement form lay open, recording the words he couldn't take back. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. Sarah stood, saying softly to herself, and that lesson ends in court. 2 days after the interrogation, the district prosecutor, ADA Mark Wheeler, signed off on the thick file of nearly 100 pages. On the cover, it clearly stated, State of Kentucky versus Derrick Caldwell, homicide Class A felony. Inside were all the physical evidence, forensic reports, spectral analysis results, cell tower data, and Derrick's confrontation transcript. Wheeler said curtly, as he handed the arrest warrant to Sarah Nolan, that's enough, we're taking him down. That noon the SWAT team coordinated with local police to surround Caldwell Motors, the garage off Highway 68, where Derrick had been running things for over 20 years, as if nothing had ever happened. Sirens wailed, startling folks along the roadside, a few curious onlookers stopping to watch. Sarah stood outside the barricade, radio in hand. Move in, she said sharply. The garage door was yanked open, 4 SWAT officers rushed in, guns lowered, shouting, police. Hands up. Derrick was standing by the workbench, hands greasy with oil, his face only briefly freezing before he calmly looked up. What's this about? He asked, voice dry. Sarah stepped forward, flashing the arrest warrant. Derrick Caldwell, you're under arrest for murder. The victim is Leonard Little. He gave a thin smile. 25 years, and you folks still aren't tired of chasing ghosts. An officer cuffed his hands behind his back, reciting his Miranda rights. As he passed Sarah, he glanced at her, faint smile lingering. If that truck had sunk deeper, no one would have ever found it. Sarah replied coolly, almost a whisper, but water doesn't hide things forever. As Derrick was escorted to the car, the forensics team began searching the garage. Every nook and cranny was marked off. The back paint room, reeking of solvents, had a row of dusty wooden shelves. A tech called out loudly, Detective Nolan, you need to see this. Sarah stepped in, flashlight sweeping over the row of old paint cans. In the bottom corner, a 5-gallon metal drum, label crimson red, DuPont Auto Coating, 1996. She crouched down, checking the faded stamp. The serial number matched exactly the red paint sample the forensics lab had identified. God, she murmured. He's kept it all these years. The paint drum was sealed on site, along with a handwritten color mixing chart smeared with faded red paint. A tech pointed out, the initials LL marked in the corner here. Sarah paused for a few seconds. LL, Leonard Little. It seemed Caldwell had used this very paint to touch up the Silverado after the crash, then figured no one would ever catch on. In the garage's small office, police found old insurance receipts, repair documents, and a hand-sketched diagram of the collision model. A scrawled note, speed 30, force enough to push down the slope. Sarah held the paper, reading every word again. No confession needed, the little details spoke for themselves. Outside, the wind picked up strong. Police loaded Derrick into the car, red and blue lights flashing off the garage windows. As the door shut, he tilted his head to look at Sarah through the gap, eyes flat and cold. I don't regret it, he said softly. He needed to learn a lesson. Sarah shot back, voice firm, and that lesson's gonna get taught in court. As the convoy pulled away, Sarah stood still in the lot. Caldwell Motors garage, once buzzing with drill whines and gasoline smells, now just the monotonous howl of wind through the rolled-up door. She eyed the sealed paint drum, its deep red label glinting in the sunset. That was the color of the truck that had ended a life, and the color of the final evidence, linking past to present. A young officer approached, asking quietly, "Detective, what do you think he kept that paint drum for all these years?" Sarah replied softly, "Maybe to remind himself he'd won. He figured no one would ever find it. But secrets weigh more than water." She signed off on the evidence seizure log, glancing up at the darkening sky. Rain started falling again, light, steady, like a distant echo from that 1997 night. Each drop hit the garage's tin roof, ringing out like the delayed but unerring tap of justice approaching. Sarah watched the patrol car lights fade down the road, knowing the long journey of the Leonard Little case had finally reached its point of no return. Derrick Caldwell was no longer the devoted friend in the town's memory. He was the man betrayed by the lake water itself, his own truck, and that red paint. The Mercer County courtroom was packed on the first day of the state of Kentucky versus Derrick Caldwell trial. After nearly 30 years, Leonard Little's disappearance was no longer a mystery. It had become a statewide criminal spectacle. The public gallery overflowed reporters, locals and folks who'd known both men back in the day. ADA Mark Wheeler, the prosecutor, opened his statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case lay buried under water for over 2 decades, but science brought it back to the surface. We'll prove that Derrick Caldwell didn't just cause Leonard Little's death, he deliberately staged the scene as an accident." On the evidence table sat everything that had sunk with the Lexus: autopsy photos, ROV footage of the body discovery, a 3D collision model, and DNA reports confirming Caldwell had sat in the passenger seat. Wheeler stated clearly, "These exhibits, even after 25 years under the mud, all tell the same story. Leonard Little didn't die in an accident." At the defense table, Derrick Caldwell sat stone-faced in a gray suit, eyes blank. Defense attorney Harold Pike went with the only counter-accident: no intent. The courtroom lights dimmed. On the large screen, the Rapid Recovery KY team's ROV video began playing. White light swept through the mud, then the moss-covered Lexus emerged. When the human hand appeared, the room fell silent. Wheeler said, "This is Leonard Little. We can't let this death stay buried any longer." Next, the 3D collision reconstruction played. 2 vehicles materialized in virtual space. The red Chevy Silverado barreling sideways at 35 miles per hour, slamming into the right flank of the black Lexus at an 18 degrees angle. The sedan spun, slid down the slope, and vanished under the water. The impact sound echoed, making a few in the gallery hold their breath. Dr. Raj Patel, chief forensic pathologist, took the stand. Calm and low-voiced, "No water in the lungs, no foam in the trachea. Mr. Little was dead before the car submerged. 3 fractured ribs, right lung contusion, classic signs of direct flank impact force. Wheeler asked, "In your opinion, was this an accident?" Patel shook his head. "No, I certify. Homicide, blunt force trauma prior to submersion." Prosecution presented the victim's jacket, pointing to the red paint chip. Patel continued, "Under SEMS EDS microscopy, we detected metallic red base coat and white acrylic primer, identical to the paint on the defendant's Silverado." A juror murmured softly, "A perfect match. Down to the molecule," Patel replied. Tech expert Det. Ron Miles took the stand to present the digital reconstruction model. He pointed to each detail: impact at 35 miles per hour, 18 degrees angle of incidence, force from the higher truck bed, right at the Silverado's front bumper position. Lexus rotated 140 degrees, slid down the embankment. Driver fractured instantly. Wheeler asked, "Could this impact have been accidental?" Miles answered flatly, "Impossible. The force direction, impact angle, and positioning all indicate intent." Defense attorney Pike stood. "Mr. Miles, you're simulating, not witnessing, you're speculating." Miles replied evenly, "Science doesn't speculate, sir. It measures." Wheeler pressed on, playing the audio of Derrick's interrogation. His voice filled the room. "I just wanted to teach him a lesson." Wheeler paused the video, facing the jury. "A lesson delivered at 35 miles an hour, killing the man on impact." Defense objected, but the judge allowed it to continue. Pike decided to call Derrick to the stand for his own defense. "Mr. Caldwell," Pike asked, "did you intentionally kill Leonard Little?" "No," Derrick replied immediately. "That night, we argued. I just wanted to stop his car, didn't realize it would skid and lose control." Wheeler approached, "So why the impact to the right flank, not the front?" Derrick faltered slightly. "I swerved to avoid, but still T-boned your friend's car." Wheeler pressed, "And why report the truck stolen just 4 days after?" Derrick narrowed his eyes, voice hoarse. "It broke down. I was afraid of getting blamed." "What about selling the truck frame for scrap in Louisville in 1998? Wheeler produced the certificate. Derrick went silent. "Did you or didn't you?" Wheeler repeated. Derrick whispered, "I needed money to fix the shop." The jury leaned forward, jotting notes. No eyes neutral anymore. Wheeler wrapped his questioning, turning to the jury. "An innocent man doesn't hide a truck, doesn't stage an accident, doesn't repaint with the exact paint from the weapon." After 3 days of arguments, the trial reached its close. Wheeler gave his final words. 25 years, a victim forgotten, a killer living among us, like an upstanding citizen. But evidence doesn't forget. It led us right to his garage door. Pike countered weakly, "No direct eyewitness, just a chain of assumptions. It could all be an accident." The judge sent the jury to deliberate. The air grew thick with tension. Sarah sat in the back row, eyes on the prosecution table, where Leonard's dark jacket lay neatly folded in its evidence bag. 2 hours later, the deliberation room door opened. The 12 jurors filed back in, faces somber. The clerk asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreman nodded, handing the judge the paper. He read it slowly. "On the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty. On the charge of second-degree manslaughter, guilty. On the charge of tampering with evidence, guilty." Derrick closed his eyes, gave a thin smile, no reaction. Sarah exhaled, bowing her head slightly. She wasn't jubilant, just relieved. Justice had come, even if late. The judge sentenced. Derrick Caldwell is sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for second-degree manslaughter, and 10 years for evidence tampering. Sentences to run concurrently. The gavel fell. Derrick turned to look at Sarah, murmuring almost inaudibly, "If that truck had sunk deeper, no one would have ever found it." She met his gaze, eyes cold, but water doesn't hide things forever. As police led Derrick away, the courtroom lights reflected off the windows, shining down on the thick closed file. Wheeler packed his papers, saying quietly to Sarah, 25 years, and that truck still spoke up. She nodded, eyes on the photo of Leonard pinned to the back wall. Outside the courthouse, Kentucky skies were mildly sunny, light spilling down the stone steps. Sarah stepped out, tilting her face to the sky. Finally, the Leonard Little case, the one thought dead with time, had been called by its true name: murder. No more rumors, no more water shadows, just the truth, and the sentence ringing out in broad daylight. The verdict hit Harrodsburg, like a quiet earthquake, unlike any before. News spread faster than wind off Herrington Lake. Folks couldn't believe it. The man who'd led prayer vigils, raised funds to search for his buddy, the one everyone called Lenny's devoted friend, was the killer himself. Mechanics from Caldwell Motors' old shop refused interviews, just hanging their heads in silence. An elderly woman, who'd lived next door to Derrick, burst into tears. "I baked him pie the day they searched for Leonard. Oh God, I believed him." Local papers splashed huge headlines on page 1. Truth surfaces at Herrington Lake. A bold photo of the dredged-up Lexus dominated the spread, captioned, "After 25 years, the truth emerges with the mud." Online forums buzzed endlessly. Some said justice was late but deserved. Others agonized over living next to a killer your whole life without knowing. Derrick's old shop shuttered hastily, the Caldwell Motors sign yanked down, leaving faint paint streaks on the brick wall. A week after the trial, Herrington Lake turned into a hotspot, not just for media, but for investigators. State officials decided to turn the lake area into a water search training site for cold case units and rapid recovery teams. New sonar buoys were deployed, modern scanning grids tested. Adam Brooks, the diver who'd found the car the year before, was invited back as a tech consultant. As he gazed at the water again, his voice trembled faintly. "Last year, we didn't know we were hunting justice, now we do." On the shore, a small memorial plaque went up, etched simply, "In memory of Leonard Little, 1970, 1997. Justice, at last." Wildflowers ringed it, locals quietly placing bouquets or paper boats to drift out on the lake. They said the water here was no longer a symbol of loss, but proof that every secret eventually surfaces. At Cold Case Unit headquarters, Sarah Nolan sat at her desk, the late afternoon light flooding the room. On the table lay the thick file, now neatly closed, fresh label reading, "Closed, conviction secured." Beside it, a small red paint chip preserved as evidence, the thing that had cracked open a case thought finished. She flipped to the last page of the investigation log, adding a short line in blue pen: "Water may hold secrets, but metal always remembers the first impact." She set the pen down, looking out the window. In the distance, Herrington Lake lay under a thin mist, sunlight streaking it silver. The surface was calm, but beneath stretched a long human tale of mistakes, betrayal, and a justice that never truly vanished. Outside, footsteps echoed lightly. ADA Wheeler entered, holding the morning paper. "Seen this?" he said, setting it on the desk. "We've just become the textbook case for the state's cold case training. This one's gonna be taught for years." Sarah gave a faint smile. "I just hope it reminds folks, never take an accident file at face value." Wheeler nodded, or better yet, never underestimate a paint chip. They fell silent, eyeing the photo in the paper, the Lexus being hauled from the water, moss clinging to the steel frame, like time's reluctant grip. "I used to worry I'd come too late," Sarah said. "But maybe justice has no expiration date, just depends on whether people bother to chase it." Late afternoon, she left headquarters. The road to the lake was quiet, trees turning with the season. At the shore, wind carried the damp scent of mud and water. This place had once been a crime scene, now it was just flat water. Overhead, new sonar poles pulsed, sound waves rippling out like the lake's heartbeat. Sarah stood listening, the steady echoes rising and fading into the mist. A group of police trainees was practicing sonar sweeps in the distance. They didn't know who she was, just saw the woman in the long coat standing still, gazing at the lake, like she was tuning into the past. Adam Brooks, spotting her, waved. "This time," he said over the radio, "we'll find whatever's down there, no matter how small." Sarah nodded faintly. "Let the water tell the rest," she replied. On the lake, a small boat moved slowly, sonar waves spreading into sound circles. The pulses carried far, then bounced back, like an echo of 25 years' silence, now replayed in a new rhythm. As dusk fell, fog thickened. The day's last sun painted the lake deep bronze, reflecting a faint red glow, just like that old paint. Sarah lingered, then turned away, walking slowly down the dirt path. Behind her, the sonar droned on, low and steady, like an eternal reminder. Every secret has its frequency, if you're patient enough to listen. In the distance, a new sign glowed: Herrington Lake Cold Case Training Facility. Against the mist, the letters shimmered like a promise. The lake lay peaceful, but in that deep hum, you could almost hear an old voice. "I just wanted to teach him a lesson." Now that lesson was over, not in shadows, but in the light of justice. And beneath Herrington Lake's surface, where sonar still pulsed steadily, the past had finally been found. In the story Kentucky 1997, Cold Case Solved, Arrest Shocks Community. What the American community today should reflect on isn't just the crime, but how the truth was hauled up from the water. Thanks to technology, procedural discipline, and citizen voices, the ROV scan, spotting the Lexus under Herrington Lake, the red paint chip matching the Chevy Silverado, Derrick's DNA still on the passenger seat belt, and the airtight chain of custody, all show modern justice relies on data and persistence, not gossip. The real-world lesson: when life hands you a convenient accident explanation, don't buy it. Ask, where's the evidence? On a personal level, keep records, messages, receipts, crime scene photos, like the Caldwell Motors receipts, or cell tower maps that flip the case. It's not just American neat freak habit, it's self-protection and protecting others. On a community level, don't downplay witness roles. Fisherman Raymond Carter's call about 2 cars, then only one leaving, is civic duty gold standard. If you spot something off, call 911 or a tip line, and follow through till it's logged. On an institutional level, the story urges us to back budgets for cold case units. Sonar ROV training, like Herrington Lake, now turned training site, and standardized interagency data, so no lead gets lost. Finally, in personal relationships, money fights, ego, or teaching a lesson, like Derrick's, can escalate to disaster. Prioritize safety, walk away from hot situations, seek mediation or counseling. Water may hold secrets, but metal and data remembers a long time. In everyday life, honesty, careful record keeping, and speaking up are the sonar that lets us see through the fog. Thanks for following the story of the Leonard Little case, where the truth finally surfaced from the water after over 2 decades. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep uncovering time-forgotten files, where justice always finds its way back.